Laura Jane Grace was born Thomas Gable. She struggled with gender issues from as early as she can remember. She suffered from a thing called gender dysphoria. She never felt right in her own skin, as she was born a man. It was a struggle with her whole life. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about her backstory, why she's been such an inspiration to so many people, and why so many people look up to her now. Her name might not sound familiar to all, but her punk band, Against Me, has been around for just about 15 years. Writing, touring, and everything. She's done it all, and she's a punk legend. It all started when she was born in Fort Benning, Georgia. Her father was in the military. He was a major in the U.S. Army, so she got moved around a lot and had to live such places as Germany and Italy throughout her early life. And a lot of people struggle with different issues when they are in a military household, moving around a lot, never really making connections, switching schools, all such things. She was always the new kid, the new boy, that she never felt comfortable. She started cross-dressing at a young age, putting on her mother's clothes and shoes and kind of walking around the house. Her parents had a divorce when she was very young, at the age 11, and they never spoke again. She spent a lot of time playing with Barbies and wishing she was Madonna and all these different things, but due to the divorce, it wasn't really noticed. As she moved on into her teen years, she dealt with a lot of bullying, being called different names. People were starting to see through what the issues were with her. They called her a faggot. They said all those things dealing with gender and sexuality, and it made her stop to think and realize, I really am in the wrong body. She started to skip school and cross-dress at home so she could feel free. She started experimenting with drugs and alcohol, all along the lines of marijuana, cocaine, and LSD by the age of 14. She got a drug charge that year for marijuana possession. She found punk rock, as some people do. They find music and it really helps them see through all the bad and release their emotions and harbor in on what's really going on, and write and experiment and let loose. If you can't say something correctly, you can sing it sometimes better. She moved to Gainesville, Florida at the age of 18 and began Against Me as a solo project. She would play small venues and shows, just her and a guitar on stage. And she did release a lot of things through her lyrics, and as Against Me began getting bigger and bigger, she decided to add on people onto her lineup as an actual band. She had a lot of run-ins with the police, and they were all violent. And she states that, she was always very obedient and obeyed whatever the cops would say to her, but she seemed to always be abused by the law or by anyone that was above her. As Against Me began getting bigger and bigger and more popular, they did get signed onto a record label. She felt like she was pretending to be the typical white guy in a punk band, the angry misogynist with the tattoos and tight pants, and she felt like she was putting on a play, a performance. It wasn't her. She didn't want to be seen as this stereotype. She had feelings of herself that she wanted to convey that she was unable to. In a lot of her songs, she started writing lyrics that conveyed a little bit more about her gender issues, and she thought people would notice, and nobody really did. Being in that edgier music genre, a lot of people thought she just was being edgy, and that there was some hidden metaphor in all of her lyrics, and that her talking about specifically wishing she was born as a woman, which is one of her lyrics, they thought it was some kind of metaphor, symbolism for whatever that could be. She got married young due to being in the band. She wasn't very happy about it as she got older. She said that she was too young herself. She was married at 20, divorced by 24. She went through a long depression period after the divorce. They were touring, and it's very hard on people. And so she had another stint with drugs and alcohol. But as she knew she was having issues with this, she decided to go on an 18-month sabbatical of sorts and started writing Transgender Dysphoria Blues, which is Against Me's album that released in 2014. But she began writing it in 2007. She met her current wife, Heather Hanora, at Warped Tour. She was an artist working for Avenged Sevenfold, and they got married. She swore off cross-dressing, being womanly, anything that had to do with the opposite gender. She said no more. She was going to continue living as Thomas Gable, and they ended up having a daughter in 2009. And with her wife being pregnant, and then once her daughter was finally born, the dysphoria began to return. She moved to St. Augustine, Florida in 2010. She canceled many tours that year and ended up leaving her label. She later on opened up her own label, Total Treble Music, in order to further release songs for Against Me. In May 2012, she became publicly out as transgender. She had told her wife, told her band, and it was now time to tell the fans and the public. She was inspired by one of her own fans that were transgender that she met at one of her shows. And from then on, she decided to live 100% fully as a woman. She is undergoing physical transitions still. She decided that she would live for a little while in full woman dress and as a woman before she went over and underwent anything too extreme. She does take hormone therapies and continues to do so. Her wife and her are no longer together as of January of last year. They are living separately. We don't know what further has happened with that. She was very fearful to admit her lifestyle to her wife, and they did stay married for a couple years before separating recently. And Transgender Dysphoria Blues released in January 2014, which was about the same time that she came out to the public as transgender. And she has been a huge voice in the transgender community. Laura Jane Grace was once seen as this crazy, edgy, anarchist punk guy, and you know, a badass punk guy with tattoos that yells into a microphone and shreds on guitar. And that was never who she was. She was always on the inside Laura Jane Grace. And her mother even told her if she would have been born a girl, her name would have been Laura. And Grace is her mother's maiden name. She has been holding this in for a quarter of a century, and for her to finally be free is a wake-up call for a lot of people that can go through the same thing, that maybe are feeling the same way or have for years, maybe even longer than Laura Jane Grace has. And for her to be so public about it is really inspiring about, you know, not hiding your true self, you know, be who you are, and no matter what, instead of, you know, being a badass punk dude, she's now just a badass punk chick. and she sings the same and writes the same crazy lyrics and runs around stage like a crazy person, then that will never change, because who she is a musician, not Thomas Gable.